You become that which you embody. This is the whole secret power. But to manifest that mighty power that is ours, we must obey that source and embody the characteristics which it possesses. Then we should not hesitate to proclaim, "I am that," as the Hindus put it, when that becomes the thing we have embodied. This will all become perfectly clear to anyone who will dwell on the matter for a time. In this state, willpower is not a method of control. Willpower gives us the impetus for bringing that control into existence, but it is not the motivating factor back of the control. Will may differ entirely from control. Self-will never is able to project thoughts to one central point. Definite control or mind action is capable of carrying thoughts, feelings, or actions to one central control, which is a definite attribute or element that man uses always, in which he has dominion to work with, not over, but to work with. That is the very force which man brings into activity the moment he brings his thought to that focal point of principle which activates all conditions. Let us take a very simple illustration. Man has power to bring his mind into subjection to the principles of mathematics, but he does not have the will to make the principle act. The principle acts of itself and is a single center of control within its sphere. Man may bring his will up to the point of the activity of the principle, but from then on the principle is the motivating force, and through this subjection of his will, to be more accurate, he finds the secret of his mathematical power. The principle of the human will is that it is to be brought into subjectivity to some higher authority, and thus man becomes the embodiment of it, and is possessed of the power of this higher authority. Man's weakness is brought about through making himself subject to that which in reality has no power, and this should be proof to him of the immense power which is possible to him. He must now learn to apply this principle of his own will, and recognize power as existing only in the one principle. Our everyday life is a concrete application of this fact, in that our statements conform to the one principle or one mind. We vision or project an ideal. Let us say that that ideal is for perfection. We immediately come into direct accord with the one mind control or principle. We project an ideal for ourselves to accomplish. If it is a high ideal, that power immediately becomes active and brings that ideal into existence. The moment that ideal is projected and the force back of it becomes active through it, that ideal is complete. That is, the moment the ideal is released from the activity of our will and is projected into the activity of the one principle, it is a completed thing. So long as there is any dual sense, it is difficult for anyone to see how this can be true on the manifest plane. The masters do not take into consideration any plane outside of the spiritual made manifest. If we do not take into consideration any plane outside of the spiritual, it must be in existence always after the statement is made, even before the statement is made. We quite evidently withhold from ourselves the accomplishment of our ideal because we look to three planes upon which it may manifest. It is found very conclusively today that it manifests only on one plane. It manifests on the spiritual plane always. It is always fact. Now, if we hold to and remain within that spiritual plane, we would see it in its true expression. We would not need to look to the material at all, for when we do, we speak in terms of materializations, and materialization is not spiritually a fact. The actual thing is the fact always. That is the spiritual made manifest. 2 + 2 = 4 in the mathematical principle. It equals 4 in the mind, and likewise in manifestation. This is not 3 planes, but it is all the mathematical facts separated or differentiated at no point whatever. After the manifestation, it is said that it does no harm to name it material or physical, because you cannot harm the fact, but it is always elevated or exalted to the spiritual. That was Jesus' meaning when he said, "If you exalt all things to spirit, they are in existence already." Evidently, he had that very thing in mind when he gave the prayer, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me, and that you do hear me always." He knew fully that that which he saw as his ideal was already accomplished. To him it came forth instantly. Then he gave the statement that if you go forth into the vineyard, it is ready for harvest. Now, if we take that definite position, there is no question but that we would be out of this difficulty completely. He immediately rose above every difficulty by the very attitude that he took. It was not a long, arduous process to him. It was instantaneous. He saw completely through the non-existence of them. That is not claiming that he denied them. It is quite evident that he never denied any condition. He always rose above it to the true spiritual condition, and then there was no need for denial or for paying any attention to anything but the true spiritual condition. He said, "I live always in spirit." Our Bible says, "I live always in a spirit," being an entirely wrong interpretation. The interpolation of a where it does not belong makes a lot of difference. That is where many mistakes were made in our understanding. The Christian Bible says God is a spirit. The original was God is spirit, never confining him to one attribute or one condition. One writer said it is like trying to crowd God into the quart measure of our intellect. Spirit and mind are synonymous. They are one and the same in vibratory influence. That which seems to make a difference is that we take our thoughts as indicating mind. Mind is consciousness, for mind and consciousness are inseparable. The element of consciousness is thought, and when conscious of spiritual fact, there is no difference to us between mind and spirit. Read that again. The element of consciousness is thought, and when conscious of spiritual fact, there is no difference to us between mind and spirit. We are in a state of spiritual consciousness. You are right in thinking of mind as consciousness in action, but so is spirit consciousness in action. They too are synonymous. Either may become quiescent or become submerged in the individual, but they are not submerged in the outer condition. If the outer is like the inner, mind is never submerged in the individual, but is only quiescent. The individual only thinks that it is submerged, and to that person it may become non-existent because he is not conscious of it. The consciousness is always there and springs into existence instantly if one projects consciousness toward that which always is, the spiritual fact. The element of consciousness is the directive rather than the motivating agency of mind. Thus it is indispensable in the sending forth of the emanations of mind, or as we put it, in stepping up the emanations of mind to their true state, providing the element of consciousness is true to the spiritual fact.